And here's a look at where that power struggle stands tonight between GOP legislators and Governor Whitmer. Federal stimulus funds will provide Michigan with more than $10 billion. The governor and legislators have 60 days to spend that relief money. But the House Budget Chair wants Whitmer to include Republicans in future COVID decisions. And last week, the state Senate gave Majority Leader Mike Shirkey the power to sue the governor if she releases the funds without them being appropriated by legislators. So joining me tonight is GOP State Representative Ben Frederick, who's the House Majority Floor Leader. We thank you for being with us tonight, Representative Frederick.
With you, thank you.
All right, so let's get right to it. The people of Michigan, medical professionals, urging lawmakers and the governor to come together and release these funds. What do you say is holding up the progress?
Well, I think it should be noted that a great proportion of the funds have already been released. There's been billions of dollars released, particularly related to the key priorities of COVID. But there also have been numerous voices over the last year that have spoken to some of the harms caused by COVID response policies. And I think that's really where you see lawmakers, some on both sides of the aisle, raising objections to a diminished voice in engaging with the administration on how we move forward in COVID response, and also providing clarity as to what the plan even is. We have one of the most ill-defined re-engagement plans of any state in the country with no specific timelines, goals, or benchmarks. So people have lost hope, certainty, and have lost a lot of hope as well.
Well, and thank you for that. Important to know that some of that money has been released, but you're trying to fine tune, how, where, when, why. What do you say to people, if the state can't come together and we lose billions in funding for testing and vaccinations and support for the state?
Well, frankly, I don't see that happening.
Okay.
I think there is going to be that engagement. I think that there has got to be some type of an assent from the governor, an acknowledgement of the fact that the people's voice is represented through the legislature as well as her own office. And there has to be that interplay. I don't think that's unreasonable. It's certainly what the people expect. As we heard in the prior segment, there's still challenges to things like vaccine rollout. Vaccine in particular is interesting in that the funding is not the issue there. There's a logistics, a supply chain issue. There's actually a lot of funds in reserve readily available across the state with these health departments. But there has to be more of an interaction between the administration and those frontline providers.
And how do you feel some of these decisions are being reached? What is the GOP sense and where the barometer is coming and the numbers and the decisions?
Well, that's the part that's been frustrating. I've spoken about data and metrics for most of the last year because without the absence of a plan being released by the governor, cynicism is abound. There's great confusion as to how these things are done, and we kind of tick off one thing at a time off of a list based on public outcry or pressure, outside of pointing to a core strategy that would allow people some certainty and be able to plan their lives. And I believe actually boosts compliance in mitigation methods because people would see the practical outcome or a goal tied to the behaviors that they're being asked to take.
So do you think the GOP House and Senate can come together to work with this Democratic governor to solve these much needed problems in our state, or will there always be this partisan divide?
Well, I do think that we can. I think we saw broad bipartisan votes, at least in the legislature, on the COVID relief funding that was passed last week prior to some of the vetoes that came down from the governor. So there is an interest in working across the aisle, certainly in the legislature itself. But I do think there has to be some contrition on the part of the governor to really engage in this process. She was a former member of the legislative branch, saw a value for that role at the time. We represent our constituencies and we represent vulnerable populations and healthcare. We feel a lot of these voices have been diminished. They need to be listened to, and that's why we have the legislative process.
And one that we appreciate as people of Michigan. Thank you for coming together on this one and for joining me tonight, Representative Frederick. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, Dave.